Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LASE Insight Series, or as we refer to the LASE Insight Series, turned upside down. This virtual presentation is taking place of the live presentations that we've had for the last few years. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Karen Whitmire. I am the Program Director for LASE, and it is my honor and privilege to serve in that role and as Educational Consultant at Emmanuel Olivet. And now I'll let my friends introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Laura Stolen, and I am a LASE resource consultant, and I am out of Emmanuel Lutheran in Wentzville.
Hello, my name is Mara Springer, and I am an education specialist, and I serve at St. John's Lutheran Church or School in Arnold. And we welcome you to this presentation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to start by talking about social and emotional needs for students as we get back into the classrooms. And I realize some of you may be doing blended learning, and so you may have to adapt some of these ideas, but be thinking about those social and emotional needs. Here's why. What do we know? We know that remote teaching and learning was stressful for them and for us. That loss of control for them and for us was stressful. That being isolated from friends was stressful. And that the unpredictability of current situation is stressful. Everything that we've been doing and are going through now is stressful. That stress makes the brain act differently. When our brain has those stress hormones and chemicals in it, it doesn't retain in the same way that it does when we don't have all that stress. We're more likely to remember our feelings and some experiences, but we're not as likely to remember facts and details. So learning is not going to be as clear and well defined. Therefore, even our most successful, capable students probably didn't master and retain what we would normally expect them to. We also need to think about a new normal, because even those of us who are going back into the classroom have new rules. We're wearing masks, we're staying 6 feet apart, we're wiping everything down all the time. So we need to find where normal is going to be and how it's going to feel. And we need to find ways then to find comfort in those situations as we are together, whether it's some virtually and some in the classroom, all in the classroom, or all online. So what can we do? I'd like to touch on 4 points: building community, processing the past, giving a sense of control through choices, and teaching emotional awareness and regulation, because those stressful situations make emotions live much closer to the surface. So let's dig into those topics. First, building community, and I'm going to use the word intentionally a lot, because we have to be intentional about what we do to accomplish these things. First, intentionally spend time building a feeling of togetherness. Now, we're all used to doing that at the beginning of the school year. Hey, it's back to school day, and we play get to know you games, and we do different things to get to know each other. What I'm asking you to do this year is to think about doing that beyond the first day. Maybe consider starting each day for the first few weeks with a little activity that helps build community, rather than just pile it all into the first day and then plow right through. Spend a few minutes every day for the first few weeks trying to build community. I have some suggestions on the slide of ideas, but you probably have ideas you already use and maybe can just adapt to the situation. One of my favorites that I'm going to bring up is an idea called 2 things. So rather than having someone come up with a big list of 85 things and seeing who has those in common, think of 2 things, whether it's 2 things you really like, 2 things everybody knows about me, 2 things I wish everyone knew, 2 favorite foods. Whatever it is, the 2 things method works for a lot of situations. There's a game called All My Friends Musical Chairs. Now, because of COVID, we're probably not going to be changing seats, but you can adapt this game. It's a game where you try and take the seat of someone. You say, all my friends love dogs, and every dog lover has to stand up and change seats. Well, you can still have every dog lover stand up, but then the last person to stand up maybe is the person who's it and trades and comes to the front, and that person goes back to his or her own seat. So that's a fun one to play. That can also be adapted to a virtual situation. You might just have kids put their hands on their head if it's true for them, and then the last one to put their hands on their head maybe is the next caller. A game called Hey Me Too, which it's not really a game, but it lets kids get up and stand up next to their seat. So if you choose someone's name and they say, I love pizza, everybody for whom that's true stands up and says, hey, me too. And you just take turns doing those kinds of things and just listing things that are your favorites. And you can Google community building games and getting to know you games and find some other things to add to your repertoire. But like I said, you want to try and do a little bit of that every day for the first couple of weeks. Getting people to know each other better and feel like a family in your classroom. The next thing I want to talk about is processing the past. This is important in terms of helping people decompress all those emotions that they have built up over what we've been doing for the last several months. So, intentionally spend time, and again, maybe not every day, but maybe you have processing Tuesdays or think about it Thursdays, whatever you want to do where you spend a few minutes at least once a week talking about what you've been through, what's changed, what you like, what you hated. Make a pros and cons list. Just have a class discussion one time. Again, the two things practice. Think of two things that you liked or didn't like. Put it on a Post-it note, and you can just put the Post-it notes up on a bulletin board for a while. Also, playing different games like the alphabet game where you add on. Some first person adds something that starts with the letter A, letter B, letter C, etc., and go through the alphabet, play that game. Or make a time capsule, but find a way to let you and your students process those feelings from what has happened in the past. Next, we want to talk about choices, and this is so hard because we keep getting new sets of rules and everything has become so rigid. So you want to intentionally, there's that word again, build in opportunities for choices for your students. Think about what they can do to demonstrate that they get what it is you're teaching. Does it have to be a worksheet? Does it have to be an essay? Or are there other things that they could do? Can you give them a tic-tac-toe choice board? Can you let them just fill out a sheet or write down their most important two things and make a whole class list of everybody's two things? Can you have them do a brain dump? This is a fun idea where you just spend a certain amount of time, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, writing everything that you can remember. And then take that as a collection, or let that be the thing that they turn in showing what they got, because that will be a good evaluation for you of what people got and what maybe you need to revisit. Can they sing a song about it or draw a picture rather than always writing or filling in a worksheet? Again, our new normal is super rigid, so where can we be flexible? If not where you sit or working in groups, maybe how time is spent or when you take a break. Let kids have some choices in terms of that, or how the break happens, whether it's, throw a YouTube video up and everybody dances, or how we take notes. Again, I really like that two things idea where everybody writes down the two things they want to remember, but then you make a comparison and you see how many different two things there are. Rather than doing worksheets, can they write test questions for you instead? This helps you write your test anyway. Also, think about writing notes in a retrieval format rather than writing while you're talking. So you talk, you teach, you show, you do, and then you have them write down what was important. Finally, we want to talk about emotional awareness and regulation. Again, intentionally work with those students so that they can identify their feelings. Be ready for kids to have meltdowns or super quiet, bummed out days, or days when they seem very agitated, and help them work through those. Yes, you're kind of taking on a mini counselor role, but those kids need your love and support. So, what can you do without being a certified counselor? The first thing is helping them name their emotion. When you get to the end of this presentation, there is a talking guide, and there's a picture of a poster with different faces. You can find something like that to help name emotions, or you can just say to the student, "It looks like you are feeling," and talk to them about their feelings and see if they will respond to that. Teach calming strategies. I'm going to tell you my 3 favorite very quickly. I have used all 3 of these with a great deal of success. The first one is square breathing. You need a square, real, or imaginary. It can be a cinder block, it can be a piece of paper, or it can just be a rectangle in the sky. You breathe in, you hold it, you breathe out, and you rest. And while you are tracing that, you say those words or whisper those words or say them in your head. So in, hold, out, rest. And you repeat that 10 times, 5 times, whatever it does to calm your brain and your body down. The second one is called happy place. And I love this one. You need to picture your own happy place. Mine is very often a beach, a very special beach in Florida. And you think about all of your senses and what those are like in that spot. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? What did you feel? What did you hear? And if it's a place that you've eaten or gotten something in your mouth, what did you taste? But literally, when you do that, you're changing your mind. So you want to literally change your mind by going to your happy place. It's kind of a cliche, but it really does work. The third one is flex and release, and little boys especially like this because you take all of the muscles in your body and you make them as tight and hard as you can. Hold it for 5 seconds, and then relax. And you repeat that between 5 and 10 times. And that flexing and releasing, especially on that last release, you can really feel a good sense of relaxation. And again, you're thinking about your muscles, and so it helps you literally change your mind. The last step then in processing those emotions is making a strategy, especially if it's an emotion that had an inappropriate outcome for school. Think about, what can I do next time when I feel this coming on? Come up with a strategy, whether it's having something that they touch or feel or squeeze when they're stressed, using one of those calming strategies, going to a quiet corner, going to the restroom, getting a drink. Come up with a really good set of strategies for what to do when you feel that emotion and you need to regain emotional control. All right, so those are the things that we wanted you to focus on for social and emotional needs. Now would be a great time to pause this video and talk amongst yourselves in terms of what you liked or what you think you could use as you start your school year.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion or reflection time about the social and emotional needs of your students and determined a strategy or two to try. I'm here now to talk to you about executive functioning and some strategies to support our students in their executive functioning skills. But what I want to do first is just spend a short amount of time to review with you what executive functioning skills are. Executive functioning skills are those skills that are lodged in the front part of our frontal lobes. Our frontal lobes are kind of like the orchestra director who it conducts the brain's chemistry and the brain's orchestra. The skills include planning and organization, self-control, task initiative, time management, metacognition, working memory, attention, flexibility, and perseverance. Now picture the students in your class that you have seen that struggle to organize their materials or to follow your schedule. They lose their papers and the report and their other school materials. Those things all fall under executive functioning. A lot of times, many times, our kids with ADHD or learning disabilities, they have problems with executive functioning skills. Not always, but often. So, what do we know? We know to expect stunted levels of initiation and organization, task completion, engagement, and attention, because what our kids were doing at home for the last 6 months was most likely done differently and less independently and didn't build on the skills that they had learned at school. We know that our return to school structure is not going to be like riding a bike. More likely, it's going to be like riding a bike with training wheels on. We know that dealing with a new situation, new learning, or new online schooling doesn't mean that our students are going to gain new skills that they need to be successful automatically. We know that students that had weak EF skills are going to return with them being even weaker. We know that the ability to initiate and sustain attention will be weakened because it's been 6 months since our students had the demands of a full school day. Just like in athlete practices, our students haven't had practice using their EF skills, so they're going to be rusty. So therefore, what I want you to do right now is take out a piece of paper or the listening guide, write the word should on it, draw a circle around it, and cross it out. We need to, this year especially, take out the sentence stems, they should, and I shouldn't. Our students should be able to do things at this point in time of the year, but they're not going to be able to. We shouldn't have to reteach some of these skills over and over and over, but we're going to have to support them in that way. Therefore, we know that all students, but especially those with EF weaknesses, are going to need that extra support for a longer period of time. Therefore, we know we're going to intentionally provide scaffolding and structure and routine, and we have to accept the fact that we're going to need to pre-teach, reteach, teach again, review, and review again all the skills and expectations we have of our kids. So what can we do? I'm going to run through these quickly and then talk about strategies for each of these. We can be intentional and systematic and explicit and structured and unified in every expectation and skill that we have of our students. We can support and encourage and model and reward sustained attention and task initiation. We can make it visual. We can build in times and opportunities for movement, and we can utilize engagement strategies. And we can make our thinking visible and audible by verbalizing what we think in our heads, speaking in positives and using language that's going to help our students think through and process. And we can give lots and lots and lots of grace to ourselves and to our students. So, what does it look like in your classroom to be intentional and systematic, explicit, structured, routine, and unified in every expectation and skill? Well, we need to expect and accept that any skill or routine that we would normally teach in a week is going to take much, much longer to become automatic. So some things that you can do is make every routine visible and visual by posting lists on walls and desks and lockers that the students can refer to. We can color code everything. Notebooks, reading is always red, science is always blue. Reading is red on the schedule, science is blue on the schedule. And we can provide visual references for what the end product of something should look like so our students know what to aim for, what a writing assignment should look like, what a math paper should look like, what a science project or an art project should look like. And just the idea of unifying expectations across grade levels, and this is a pet issue for me. For one thing, unifying expectations across grade levels makes it easier for everybody. It lessens that cognitive load that our kids have in their brains and allows them to free up their brains to think about the subject rather than the rules. You can unify things like margins and headings, types in notebooks, binders, class rules, and expectations. We can unify routines for movement like how to walk to the cafeteria, how to walk to chapel, how to go to the library, how to go to car line. It can be done for age level groups like K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, or the whole school. But this is especially helpful in junior high when our students start to have more than one teacher. We can teach these skills with intentionality and consistency until it becomes automatic. Let me tell you a story of why this strategy is so important to me. I once was working with a little guy who was a little fifth grader, and he had ADHD, and he was working really hard, but he was really feeling discouraged with one of his classes. He couldn't figure out why his papers were coming back with all these red marks on it. Well, we looked and we thought, and we looked and we thought. Well, what it turned out to be was that 3 out of his 4 teachers wanted him to put his heading on the left-hand side of the paper. 1 of his teachers wanted the heading on the right-hand side of the paper. Well, this little guy, with our weak memory, he couldn't remember where to put his name on the paper. He was lucky he was remembering to put his name on the paper. So he would put it on the left side, and the teacher would circle and draw arrows and take points off because he didn't put his name where it should be. If everybody in the middle school had the same expectation, it would have made it so much easier for this little guy and for all of our students. If you want to pick up a really good book about some of this explicit teaching, Anita Archer is an author. Dr. Anita Archer, she has a lot of great strategies in a book called Explicit Instruction. Now, what does it look like to support, encourage, and model this idea of sustained attention and task initiation in your classroom? What we need to know about kids with executive functioning weaknesses, ADHD, or a lot of just students in general, is that they don't have an internal clock. They don't have that inner sense of time. So anything that we can do to make time visible is helpful to them. So what might that look like in your classroom? You can put visual timers on your board. You can show a student how much time they have to work on an assignment. You can show how long recess is, how long lunch is. You can ask them to guesstimate how many math problems they're going to be able to finish in 7 minutes. Write that number on their paper, circle it, work for that 7 minutes, and then compare how many problems they thought they would finish with how many problems they did finish. Because our kiddos, a lot of times, they don't have a good way to guess how long something's going to take. We've talked about visual schedules. We can break tasks into smaller parts. That way our students, they feel a sense of success and progress. This is really, really good strategy for our kids in school, and it's a strategy that can transfer to online learning in case we have to do that again. Some of our students, they seem like they just can't get started. Well, they can't get started because they feel so overwhelmed. So if we have them just do a small part of the assignment, maybe 3 problems, and then come to us or come back online and show us, that gives them a little sense of accomplishment and achievement, and then they can move on and start on the rest of the assignment. An easy way to break that into chunks like that is to get a folder, cut it into thirds, have them slip their paper in there, open up the top third, work the top third of the paper, close it, then open up the middle third, and then the bottom third, so they don't see that whole paper that they have to do all at one time. What does it look like to build in times and opportunities for movement? Well, again, Mara used this word. This is something that we're really going to have to be intentional about this year, especially this year, because there's going to be so many restrictions on student interactions, seating, distancing. Teachers moving to classrooms instead of our students moving to classrooms just means that we're going to have to be all that more intentional with giving our students opportunities to move. Okay, middle school teachers, you're going to shudder when I say this, but it's okay for even middle schoolers then to have a morning recess, a lunch recess, and an afternoon recess. We know from research that movement is good for our brains. It keeps our brains active. What else could movement look like in your classroom? It could look like students standing right behind their desks for 5 minutes while you're talking or presenting a lesson, because that movement keeps their brains oxygenated and primed for learning. It could be giving permission for students to stand in the back of the classroom or the sides of the classroom, or, I know you're going to shudder again, sitting on top of their desk, depending on the kind of desk you have, just to give a little variety and novelty for them. Or teaching outside. The movement to going outside, sitting outside in someplace different, and coming back inside provides lots of movement and variety that stimulates their brains. But, like everything else, these systems of movement are going to need to be explicitly taught with what your expectations are and what it looks like to do them. Okay? So what does it look like in your classroom to make thinking visible or audible, and to speak in positives, spending more time telling your students what to do than what to not do? That's a series of do this instead of that. So let's think about it. Instead of saying, do your work, you might try saying to your student, what comes next? Have you checked the list? Tell me what you're thinking. This helps them build problem-solving skills. It could be clean your desk, or instead of saying clean your desk or clean your locker, you could say, wow, this is a mess, but it's hard to find your math in there. What do you think you should do about it? And then give them a picture of what their locker or desk should look like so they know the end product they should aim for. Instead of saying, put your name on the left-hand corner, not the bottom, not the back, not the right, not the back side. Try saying, put your name in the left-hand corner. Look at our model that's on the board or on the wall of how your paper should look, and make it look like that. I have another story to tell you. I once was in a 3rd grade classroom, and the teacher had taught a short lesson on verbs, had explained very quickly how to do the assignment, and then spent, it seemed like, 10 minutes telling the class what not to do. I checked in with that teacher at the end of the day, and she was feeling so frustrated because she felt that her class hadn't listened to her because every child had done the assignment incorrectly. Well, that's because they reflected back on the last thing that they heard. Well, the last thing that they heard was what not to do, not what to do. So always try and spin things in that positive language of what your expectation is and how it should look. Okay, what does it look like in your class to embed instruction that's going to allow for a smooth transition to distance learning? We hope it doesn't happen, but we don't know. So talk about in your class the power and importance of natural light and bringing fresh air into the mix whenever you can, so that students take that importance with them back to their homes if they have to start learning from their homes. I worked with a student this last quarter. His bedroom was in the basement that was painted black, seemingly, and he had black curtains around his room, no windows, and fell asleep repeatedly every time we met. Well, of course, there was no daylight. His brain wasn't working up. That daylight is really important. Teach all the apps to use in school from day one. Seesaw, Google Meets, Zoom, from day one, so that if our students have to transition to home, they know how to do all of those things. Determine a way to manage passwords so that students and parents can easily access them. And then create routines that are consistent across all spaces. There are anchors for the day. Whether online or face-to-face, our mornings and endings of our days can start the same, and that helps give us a feeling of normality, a normal day. A morning routine might look like checking announcements, completing the morning check-in, opening with devotion and prayer, and then starting the first lesson. Our end of the day always could look like saying a prayer, saying the Lord's Prayer, singing the doxology. Those things can be done whether in person or online and make our students feel like it's something normal, even though these times are far from normal. And then Most of all, as our Heavenly Father has showered us with grace, give lots of grace to your students and to yourself. Find some humor, some patience, and some love in all we do, knowing that our Lord has it all under control. And now, if you can, press pause and reflect or discuss about these executive functioning areas and one strategy that you might be able to try in your classroom this fall.
All right, so we have looked at social and emotional concerns of students coming back after our 6-month break. And we've also talked about executive functioning and what that might look like in our new normal classroom. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and talk about how academics may look like this upcoming school year. And I found this quote that seemed very appealing to me during this time. It says, "What is teaching? Teaching is a chaotic mess of joy and misery, intertwined with moments of pride, confusion, and love. This year in particular, it's going to be tricky, but we, like what has been said before, we have to give ourselves grace and also grace for our students." So let's talk about how we should start this school year. It's going to end up being very different than every year you've taught before. I kind of look back and think about my first year of teaching and how I didn't know any of my kids coming in. I didn't know any of their ability levels. That's kind of like what we're doing again. We're going to have to spend those first couple of weeks building relationships. And think about the academic levels of some of our students coming in. If you look at your last quarter of the previous class you taught, you had some students that excelled really, really well at this at-home learning. They had parental support, they did all the assignments, they were reading when they should have, and things looked good. You also have those students whose parents were essential workers. They weren't there. They were oftentimes taught by grandparents, aunts, uncles, maybe older siblings. You might have had some students whose parents helped a little bit too much. So we have some of this temporary learned helplessness that some of our students have encountered. So what I want to show you is a graph of what a lot of researchers are predicting that academics will look like this fall. So if you look at the graph, the first one I'm going to show you is mathematics. And what these researchers did, and you guys may have seen this because it was kind of all over the news, but it shows a solid line of what a typical school year looks like and what students have learned. You can see that the solid line goes up to where the typical line bar is, and then it goes down a little bit because during a summer slide, students do lose some of those main concepts. If you looked at the dashed middle line, it shows that what if students learned all the way until March 17th and stopped learning but retained all of those concepts previously learned. If you look at the graph, they're kind of going straight across. Then below that dashed line is a dotted line. That is similar to the summer slide, but if it started on March 17th or whenever your school shut down. If you can see, that dotted line goes down drastically. Pay attention also to the 4th and 5th grade overlap and the 5th and 6th grade overlap. In mathematics, many are predicting that those skills may not have been retained and only 50% of them retained. So some of your students are a year or a little bit more behind. If you look at the reading graph below this one, you can see that it's not as dramatic. A lot of people are predicting that the loss for reading will not be as much as it was for math. Many are saying about 70% will retain their reading skills. But keep in mind that these graphs don't have kindergarten, 1st, or 2nd grade data because they did it over a 2-year period. So if you think about those early literacy skills in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade, a lot of those are going to have to be retaught as our kids come back into the classroom. So again, on the slide, only 70% gains in reading and less than 50% in math. So what does that mean for us moving forward? As it was stated earlier, relationships should be put first, especially as our future is going to be unpredictable this school year. Our hopes are that the first month, maybe 2 months that we're in school, even if it's just for a day or two. So it's going to be very important to build those relationships because there may be a time when we are all sitting in front of our computer again. We also need to focus on the most critical skills and knowledge at every subject and grade level. So I like to look at this, I like to call them critical versus important, but not as critical. So if that website below is a godsend to some of these focus skills that are needed by students at each grade level to move on to the next level. What this company did, and if you're familiar with STAR testing or AR, reading tests, this same company compiled all of, if your state was Common Core or Standard Base, they looked at every 50 states and they looked at the entire scope and sequence of the curriculum. And they went through and figured out, well, which critical skill will my group of students need to go on to the next level? And they narrowed down the list for you. So this website lists by grade level the most important things to teach. So for example, if you want to play around with this later and you look at 5th grade math, if you look on there, it has 20 focus skills. If you go to your state standards, they say 32. So those 20 are things you really need to focus on. And also, if you look at 1st grade reading, or literacy, ELA, there were 47 critical skills that they needed to move on to 2nd grade. But if you look at the whole list of standards, there are over 100. So we need to be teaching those really critical skills and then moving on to the important skills as needed. Some examples for this that I found were in the early elementary kindergarten age, students need to be able to recognize letters, both upper and lowercase. That's critical. But an important skill, but not as critical, would maybe be alphabetizing different things based on where they are at in the alphabet. That's important, but not critical to move on to the next level. Another example from an algebra class, they need to know the Pythagorean theorem. They need to know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared can find the unknown of a right triangle. Do they need to know the proof and be able to explain what Pythagorean was thinking behind it? Not so much. So another thing we're going to have to do from early on is we are going to have to pre-assess our kids. Our kids are going to come in at such varying levels than ever before. Our learning gap for our 20 kids in our classroom is going to be very vast compared to how it was previously. We are going to have to use pre-assessments to figure out how big our gap is, or even if none of the students have accomplished that critical skill. The key thing here, though, is never grade your pre-assessments. They are for your knowledge only, and they give you guidance as to where to steer your instruction. And like it was said earlier, we are going to have to teach and reteach until our kids have understood these things. If you need to, talk to your teacher at your previous grade level. If you notice that no one in 2nd grade knows how to measure with inches, but you thought that was normally taught in the 4th quarter last year, you're going to have to teach that as part of your 3rd grade math curriculum. And you can find that out by pre-assessing them. I listed a couple of the pre-assessments I've used in the past. Entrance slips are perfect. You can have them either sitting on the kid's desk. You could have it in Google Classroom, one quick question they fill out when they're ready to move on to the next subject. You can use 4 corners if it's feasible to move around in your classroom safely. You could have different answers, either numbers or A, B, C, and D across the different corners of your room. Have students answer it at their desk and then move to the various answer that they think. You can also use a graffiti wall. Introduce, vertebrates and invertebrates, and have students write as much as they can on a piece of paper about what they know about that and decorate your wall. It's a really quick, easy way to see what they understand and what they don't and where you need to start your instruction. I would also recommend for our gifted and our twice exceptional students, have them do the hardest questions first. And if they can answer those, move them into more critical thinking options instead of just moving them on to the next level. Another thing we're going to have to use a lot is scaffolding. We're going to have to add support when needed, and once they've got it, take it away. That includes pre-teaching vocabulary, displaying visual aids around your room and actually using them while you teach. You can access their prior knowledge and do think-alouds. For example, if you're learning about the water cycle, have a big poster on your wall. Use it when you teach, talk about it. When you think the kids have got it, take it down. And if a week later a kid isn't sure what evaporation was, you can refer, remember this poster that was on my wall? What was at the top? It'll probably stir his memory to think of the clouds. Also, and many of teachers are really good about this, is differentiating. A lot of times we differentiate at the end for a test, and we forget about differentiating every day and for the lessons and the concepts we expect them to learn. We're going to have to do this in our classroom more than we ever thought of before, and probably for more students than you have in the past. 3 ways to differentiate: you can actually change the content. So that is how you're going to deliver the message. Maybe it's a lecture, a video, it could be an audio clip or something. You can use graphic organizers. For example, in a lesson of fractions, if you're teaching them about fractions, you could watch a Khan Academy video. You could use the Freyer model and talk about the definitions of numerator and denominator. You can also use food, maybe that's prepackaged, and cut it and talk about fractions. We can also differentiate in the way students process that information. So where it's safe, you can do think, pair, share. Journaling, you could have a partner talk. Lit circles are great for this. And finally, the most common, which is used all the time, is the end product of differentiating. So we need to change the end product to meet the student need and give choices, like was brought up earlier about the tic-tac-toe board. Give students choices on the way they want to show you that they've mastered what you've asked them to master. And finally, talking about universal design for learning, and this kind of reiterates the scaffolding and differentiating that I discussed. So again, offer and present the information in more than one format. Don't just give a lecture and expect the kids to know it, because they're going to need more and more teaching. They need to be given more than one way to show what they know. Group projects, oral presentations, or some kids just like the paper pencil test. Always give choices. It really helps with student engagement. And another thing is find a way to use whatever platform you're going to use every day, whether it's Google Classroom, Seesaw. That needs to be used every day so it becomes a fluid motion. We were all kind of thrown into it in March, and a lot of students did well with it. But use it every day so that students feel very comfortable if we are to move onto that platform this fall. And finally, give feedback, and effective feedback and quick feedback on those online submissions so that students know that they are doing what is expected of them. So remember, we are all in this together, and we must lean on each other for support. So go ahead and pause the video and talk about ways you can differentiate or change things in your classroom looking at academics.
Welcome back. We have just 2 more quick things to think about before we close this presentation. We thank you for your patience and your listening and your openness to learn and try something new. 2 more topics that we want to talk about. One is parents, and the last one is you. First, parents. Throughout all of this has been stressful for parents too, and maybe some of them have let you know how stressed out they are. But think about, from their point of view, what is happening. If they had to stay home, then they're trying to work from home while make sure their kids are getting their online learning done. If they had to go to work, they had to find someone to take care of their children during the day, if they could. Maybe grandparents who don't use technology were stepping in. So either way, this was stressful for them as well. So as we jump back into a new school year, think about trying to find ways to simplify and streamline communication to parents. especially if there are multiple teachers that they're dealing with. The more emails they have to open, the less likely they are to read those thoroughly, if at all. So if you can find a way to streamline your communication, make it simple and clear and very obvious what your point is, use bullet points instead of paragraphs, those kind of things, that can help. And if there is any way that you can have an assignment board virtually for the whole school by day, that would be awesome. If you can find a way to have all those expectations in one place, even though it may be annoying and difficult for you, it makes it much more likely for a parent to be able to engage in that and try and help out. Also, make their involvement easy. Any way that you can do that, and again, make it a one-shot deal, that's helpful. I know in the past, when I have one child, and there was a year where I had to go to Class Dojo, and I had to go to Google Classroom, and I had to go to another web-based thing, and I have one kiddo. So if you can find a way to everybody agree, here's what we're going to do and here's where it's going to be, you're really going to help lower your parents' stress level, and then they won't call you and text you so much. Also, don't forget about you. We, as a LASE group, love you. We honor you, we're proud of you, we're impressed by you. This was hard. And we know that it was stressful for you too. So remember that you need to get your rest. You need to eat well. You need to spend time with your Lord and Savior. You need to make sure that you get to have time with those people who love you and will build you up, especially your family. You need to find an escape hatch at school and at home. What is your way to walk away? Have a buddy at school, be able to trade something off, find a way where if you need it and you feel those emotions rising, that you can say, I need a minute. And you can either go get a cup of coffee, use the restroom all by yourself with no children there, those kinds of things. So find an escape hatch, find a buddy to help you with that. And give yourself permission, especially this year when people give you a big ask, to say, no, thank you, not at this time. My plate is full. And that is okay. And you are not a bad person when you say no. I would like to lead us in a brief prayer, and then Karen's going to come back up and wrap up for us. Again, I want to say from the heart, we love you, and we thank you for paying attention to this and be willing to make connections with those kids that you love to teach. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to teach your dear children. Please give us wisdom and courage and patience and all of the tools that we are going to need so that we can help guide your children into the lives that you would have them lead. We ask this in your dear Son, Jesus' name. Amen. And now please welcome Karen back up to the podium.
Thanks, everybody, for watching our virtual presentation, our virtual Insight series this year. We hope that next year, a year from now, that we are back together in our large group, learning new strategies to meet the kids, to meet the needs of the students that God has placed in our care. But for right now, we ask you if you'd like to follow us on Facebook under LASE Specialized Education, or check out things on our website, lutheranspecialed.org, or our brand new YouTube page, LASE Specialized Education. Once more, God's blessings on your year, and see you next year.